ton of resolve with this football team, and we'll, as I said, to me it feels like a start, feels like a beginning.
Jim Harbaugh just a couple days ago, Friday night, after the Orange Bowl, saying it felt like a beginning. This is the beginning of the Maize and Blue Review afternoon live show. I'm Dennis Fithian. That's Jim Scarcelli. And, Scar, there's one thing. There was the report on Tuesday. We talked about it in the postgame with Michigan and Rutgers. The report that there was some interest from the pros and maybe mutual interest to go to the NFL for Jim Harbaugh. But, a lot of it, if you go back, I don't know if it's a year or 2 years ago when there was some more stuff, he said, evaluate me on what I say, the statements that I made, and they've just gone back, this, I do it for free. This feels like a beginning, all of these things. And, sometimes that's dangerous, when you get into some of that coach talk or, listening to what a coach has to say when there's things going on. But, here we are, and it's still nothing official with Jim Harbaugh about him potentially coming back.
Yeah, Denny, recruiting, there are some evil people out there that will do a lot of things to negative recruit, to win a kid. And I saw it as a player, and I think at times some of this stuff is propaganda from the enemy. This might have some legs to it. I don't know. We don't know the truth. But I always believe that a lot of that stuff is just to put that doubt into kids' minds about this coach. And, these different people have different people in the media, who are Buckeyes or whatever they are. So I don't know. I'm hoping it's just a lot of BS. But listen, you're right. Jim says he loves Michigan. We know he loves Ann Arbor. He grew up there. He's got his kids are in school. His folks live right down the street. And I don't know how big a deal money is, but maybe this is a way to leverage something if it's true. He took the pay cut, and he didn't deserve, he stood up and said, look, I didn't perform. I take a pay cut. Give me another crack at it. And, now maybe, hey, I did perform. Maybe it's time to ante up, but I don't know. Does he want the challenge of winning a Super Bowl in the NFL? Does he want that challenge? I know as a coach at different levels, coaches sometimes just leave because they want another challenge. It's like when you're a kid, Danny, my old man used to get me these little car models, these plastic models, and you build the car, you get the glue, you look at the instructions, and next time he gets you a bigger one. He got the bigger one, the big truck. Sometimes there is a part of that, I think, in all of us, in any profession, that people want the next challenge. I hope it's wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but that's also out there. So a lot of things going on. What are your thoughts?
Well, I want to bring in Brandon Justice, who's joining us as well. He's the recruiting editor. Before I get my thoughts, I gave a lot of them yesterday. I spilled my guts, out there talking about, Jim Harbaugh. Brandon Justice does join us. Brandon, it's great. We just started talking about, I think it's the top. There's so many things going on, but I ranked it as the top story here because we're talking about it first, and that's Jim Harbaugh, the possibility of him at least looking at the NFL. Where are you sitting here at just a couple minutes past 4:00? Not literally, but where are you sitting on the Jim Harbaugh story?
Yeah, I think that the Harbaugh thing is kind of an annual thing. Like, we're always going to have this conversation. And the past couple of years, the conversation has been that both sides are like, okay, we're going to move on. And then an NFL team, NFL teams have taken shots on head coaches far less deserving than Jim Harbaugh, even after last season. So it wasn't going to be shocking if maybe that's where he ended up going after his potential departure last year that we spoke about. But with this year in mind and all of that, here's my stance right now, just knowing what we've read from, our supreme leader, Josh Henschke, and then, just talking with people within the program, it seems like this thing's going to be wrapped up soon. And I think that Harbaugh did what he needed to do if, in fact, it was a hey, here's a conversation that the NFL is having with me, or this NFL team is having with me. I think that was obviously smart by him, but also like completely deserved by him. I mean, he is, if you look at him now, it's funny to say this, because if you would have told me 3 years ago I was going to say this, I'd say you're crazy. But Jim Harbaugh's underpaid. You know, it just, as far as the scale goes in comparison to other coaches at his level. And he's only making that 4.5. I mean, only making $4.5 million sounds funny, but it makes sense in comparison to the other coaches on the list making nearly double that mark. So I think that as far as his salary goes, yes, deserved. And the more important thing here that I don't think we're talking about enough is if in fact the deal comes in place that we expect it to, with the details that we expect it to have, then the assistant pool is a huge deal, because that's what's going to keep around the Mike McDonalds in the world. That's what's going to keep around the Josh Gaddises of the world. That's what's going to keep around Mike Hart, who I think is arguably the most important assistant on this offensive team, arguably with Sharon Moore as well. So I just think it's up there for these assistants were so important to this season. So the assistant pool is the more important part of the deal. If you're asking me about what I think is going to happen, I do think he sticks around, and you see more assistants than usual stick around.
Well, I hope two things here. One, this week 17 in the NFL, I hope by Black Monday, which is this Monday, annually, the Black Pink Slip Monday, whatever you want to call it, in the NFL, where there'll be some coaches moving on. And then, the coaching carousel really gets going. If they do have, just have to, dot the I's and cross the T's here, it would be nice if they got it done before Monday, because if it goes past Monday, then, what everybody's saying, how this is all done and everything else, well, then, the real leverage, starts there. So that's one. The other part, with the assistants, I understand exactly what you're saying there. I mean, you're as good as your assistants. You want to keep that continuity and everything else. I also think on the name, image, and likeness front, if Jim Harbaugh, there's a chance, maybe this just came up organically. He didn't say anything, and these guys made up like, hey, Jim Harbaugh's thinking about it, and hey, great, because now that leverage is being applied here. I hope that he goes, and when he does have the conversation, and he says, hey, what's the plan? We just played Ohio State, and it took us 7 years to beat them, and then if we're going to compete with Georgia and Alabama, the two teams that are playing on Monday night, plus Texas A&M, you see the money that's being thrown around here. We need a concrete plan, or if he feels really good about that plan when it comes to, in involving this name, image, and likeness. Guard, I mean, what do you think about all that?
No, you're right. And the thing is, we don't even know what our plan is. It's not public. They're not telling anybody what it is, because I've always, since all this stuff started, I tried to put myself back in the locker room as a player, and okay, I'm getting this much, and the guy next to me is getting that much, and I think maybe I'm better than him, or it's a problem for that team unity that a coach wants to have. That's why Michigan State's got that $500 across the board deal. That's what I would want as a coach, because that everybody's getting something. You don't have anybody looking at this guy, that guy. But we really don't know the answer to that question. And I hope that, we have a great package that, that works for our players. But, Brandon, you make a good point about the coaches and the pay and be able to keep coaches. That's so important, because I think we have a great staff from top to bottom. That defensive staff is solid. The offensive staff is solid. I think he's got guys on that staff that can do both coach and recruit. And that's, it's sometimes it's not so easy to get guys that can do both of those things. But let me just say this real quick about Jim Harbaugh. I know him. I played with him, and I don't, a lot of people say a lot of things, this, that, whatever, but I know him as a high character guy. I know him as a high character guy. And I would find it really, really hard to think that he just recruited 25 kids, went to their living room, talked to their parents, and now this is real. I would have a hard time believing it. I hope it's wrong. And Brandon, I hope you're right. I hope it's just leverage, get paid. Britt Ward, sign the check. Let's be done with it. Put this bull ass BS with negative recruiting to bed.
Yeah, Brett, go ahead. How do you think it rolls out? You talked about the NLI and actually how it gets there and put in place and word of mouth and everything else. It's one of these things the fans are like, yeah, we want 25 million, 50 million, with all this. I don't know. How's it going to work?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to have to be some sort of allocation, but there's also conversations that you have to have with outside sources. Really, I don't know how I would say that, but
Entities?
you're going to have to find some third parties, where it becomes more of a who knows, a company that wants to partner up with university, similar to what. It was BYU did it with a company. I can't remember which company. I think it was Body Armor, maybe. I know there was a connection with the school there. Well, we talked about this a few weeks ago, Dennis, and we talked about how Michigan's alumni network is as broad and, as wealthy, right? I don't know if I would say wealthy or just built wealth within companies as much as any university probably in the country as far as FBS football goes. So with that in mind, the possibilities with the NLI can't really be specific. It's going to be, I think, because of that alumni network, something that we see a lot of with different variations. I mean, we saw it this year how some of the offensive linemen were doing stuff with It's Just Wings, which is a company in Ann Arbor that delivers wings. I mean, it's all over the country, but they did some stuff there. I mean, there's small stuff like that, but the real big picture stuff, I think, is going to be something where the alumni network, and I'm talking like the tip top of the alumni network, not your 2018 grads. I mean, like your 75, 85 grads who are accomplished CEOs and with things like that in mind. And I think that's where you're really going to have that edge with the alumni network. Now, as far as how these things come to fruition and how it's finalized and whose company is doing what, I mean, it might in the end not even be a Michigan grad. It might just be some company who sees a benefit in coming in partnership with the university. It might be the university having its boosters or whatever. I don't even know at this point, reading the laws of it all, what's out of bounds and what's not. It's kind of hard to read between the lines there, which is par for the course with the NCAA, I think. So with all that in mind, it's going to be really interesting to see how it all rolls out, because there really is no like set in stone way to do it. So many schools have done it so differently. You've seen Alabama have quite an accomplishment with it, and you've hardly seen anything publicized about it. I mean, you saw Quinn Ewers go to Ohio, sign a record-breaking, like, what was it, $1.2 million deal, and then leave after the first semester. So now you have to think, does that temper the bidders? So they say, does that temper the companies wanting to sponsor kids because they're kids, right? Like Quinn Ewers transferred after the first semester, but still cashed that $1.2 million check because it was all up front. So you have these things all come to mind now. So that's why I'm interested to see how Michigan is able to handle all of that. It's a tall task. We said this a few weeks ago. Michigan's a very prestigious university. It's a high character university. They pride themselves on being the better men and women of, the country, right? They have these high character morals in mind. So they're not going to go about this in any way that's not calculated and by the book and et cetera, et cetera. So that's my thoughts on it. I'm interested to see how it rolls out.
Well, speaking of millions of dollars, Charlie Batch, who played down the road at Eastern Michigan, he offered Caleb Williams, who was in the transfer portal, was a freshman at Oklahoma. His coach went to USC, and now he's in the transfer portal. Charlie Batch played in the NFL for a long time, offered Caleb Williams $1 million to go to Eastern Michigan. Scar, there's also been talk, at least, I don't know, you want to put it in the rumor category or not, that Caleb Williams reached out to Michigan to inquire about their interest in possibly bringing in they're calling him the presumptive number one pick, not next year, but the following year, because that would be when he would be draft eligible. But if they put these mock drafts together, not only for this year, not only for next year, but the following year, Caleb Williams is number one on that list. What do you think about this situation? And maybe, is Michigan, how much are they listening if Caleb Williams is on the other end of the line?
Hey, I love our quarterback situation. We couldn't ask to have, two really, really good quarterbacks. Jim's task is just to keep them both here, find a way to make them both happy, productive, and I think he's going to pull it off. In my opinion, we don't want nothing to do with this kid. We got two really good ones. I think it says something about him. He wants to leave. You're a great player. You accomplished all that in Oklahoma. Because a couple of guys are leaving, I mean, you're still the starting quarterback. I don't get it, man.
His coach left.
Yeah, I get that, but he's got a gunner coming in. The guy at Ole Miss, he's going to throw the hell out of it. He's not bringing in, David Shaw to run the Stanford offense. He's bringing a guy in that's going to fling it all over the place. So he's going to throw the ball. I like the guys we have. He saw a lot of his guys are transferring. There's a lot of guys at Oklahoma that have left, or some receivers, some guys that are talking about leaving. But me personally, I like what we got. And that Eastern Michigan thing, I saw it the other day too. That's interesting. And it's just a whole different ball of wax, man. It's a whole different deal. I can't even relate to it. But let me just say this real quick, Brendan. I was looking at, you look at Texas A&M, how they are just number one in the recruiting class. I looked at Arizona. Arizona won one game, and they made a huge jump in their recruiting. And the things I want to know, is it SMU from 1983? Is that what's happening? You see some of these programs that really, wow, where'd these guys come from? I just want to throw that out too. But I'm good with our quarterbacks, man.
Oh, I think I took you off there. There you go.
I think it's similar to the.
You were saying some great things, so I want you to go ahead and be able to hear them.
Yeah. I think I guess you could say it's similar to that. I mean, it's kind of a bidding war right now in certain aspects, not to the degree that it was when it was secondary market stuff that nobody saw. But I think that now with everything sort of wide open and the rules being, look, this is the first edition of the NLI. And if people think that it's going to be the same now that it is in 3 years from now, then you just don't pay attention to any sort of lawmaking within an NCAA. It's always amended, especially lately. So with that being said, I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see how this thing shakes out over the next couple of years. But I think right now, schools are getting as creative as they can be, and they're doing a good job of it. And a lot of these schools, though, you have to remember, Michigan has proven it can recruit without a ton of the NLI at the forefront. I know that there's still things that they're doing for their players coming in that are in the works and all of that. But, as far as these schools taking advantage of it now and really putting it at the forefront of some recruitments, for a lot of these schools, it's really all they can do. And I think SMU is a good example, or not SMU, I'm sorry. Arizona is a great example because they, like you said, they won one game. And it was Jed Fish's first year as a head coach, and it lost its defensive coordinator. I don't know who else might have. I know there was another assistant who left too, I believe, for Oregon or a school in the Pac-12. So you have a lot of movement there. It's not really like a place that on paper sounds very exciting. And yes, coaches tend to recruit the best after their first season. Their first full season is when they tend to recruit best. And so it's not shocking that Jed Fish's recruiting class is good. It is shocking that it's as good as it's been, despite how bad of a season it's had and as much movement it's had within its staff. And I think that has a lot to do with the NLI. And that's a school, for example, that has to put it at the forefront. They have to absolutely prioritize it because it's what's giving them a fighter's chance. And idealistically, that is what the NLI is supposed to do. Like, yes, it's getting students paid and all of that, which is the number one most important thing. But what it's doing for college football is it's thought to sort of even this playing field. I mean, that's why you saw Travis Hunter go to Jackson State. That's why you saw those kind of schools get the kind of kids they've gotten this year, despite bad years. They're having a fighter's chance, which, hey, I mean, it's to each their own, I guess, with this whole thing. I'm happy students are getting paid, and I'm happy that players are making money now and not, living with a beach chair in their living room. But, the whole even out the playing field type thing, I don't know how long it's going to last. We'll see. But, yeah, I think that's my thoughts on the whole what's going on with that thing, because it's ultra confusing right now to get a read on everything.
Yeah, a lot of it is semantics when it comes down to paying the players. I agree with you, Jim. If Caleb Williams called and say, hey, I appreciate it, we like you and everything else, but, we're all set at the quarterback position. I mean, you want to play wide receiver. And some people can say, hey, he's better than J.J. McCarthy. He is better than Kate McNamara. This guy's going to be the number one pick. How can you say that? Well, there's how you look, but like this guy comes in, the other two, you might as well just, kick him right to the transfer portal. I doubt that the McCarthy, if you're talking to these guys, hey, we're going to let you compete in the spring. Now you're bringing in another quarterback. I think, these guys would be out of here like that. And then with Williams just going to the highest bidder, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense anyways, because Michigan, maybe they'll step up to the plate that way, but it's just it's one of those things that it's a good conversation piece. It's almost a for sure thing that it's not going to happen. But the one thing where it comes down to semantics, they say, well, wait, you can't just go outright and pay the players, like some of these. Well, yeah, you can't come right out and say it, but you can do it a million other ways. You just give it to somebody else and say, okay, you give it to them. And nobody, and you're not breaking NCAA rules. So it's pretty easy to get around. Like, yeah, you're not, here's your big bag of cash. Just hand it to somebody else and say, hey, you hand it to him. And it's good. So, I mean, this is the playing field now. This is the way it's going down. So you can hate it. You can say, hey, that's cheating. You can say, hey, all the other teams that were doing it before, now they're, they were in first. So they've just got this pipeline that they can do it. But I mean, it's, I don't know, they say like the new reality, but it's the new rules. And, you can get in there and you can fire away, or you can continue to try to do it the old way. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, Denny, I've shared the story about Bear Bryant, right? Back in Texas A&M when he got the job at Texas A&M. I read all of Bear Bryant's book. Used to love reading his stuff. But he got the job at Texas A&M, and all them alumni were saying how much they wanted to win, how much we want to win. So Bear Bryant had a meeting with the alum. He got a big old bucket. He put it in the middle of the table with all them alumni and says, well, how much do you guys really want to win? Because there's a kid down here, John David Crow, who ended up being the Heisman Trophy winner down in Houston, whatever he was. He said, how bad do you guys want to win? And they start putting money in that bucket. He said, took that down to John David Crow and got him signed. That's it was a funny story, but it's kind of like, is that where we're at? But just wanted to throw that little story out there with you.
Well, it's there. The buckets are being filled up. And now you just hand it to them, or just have somebody else hand it to them, and it's all right. All right. We can sit around talking about name, image, and likeness, and, whether or not Jim Harbaugh is coming back or not. But I just want to say something. Like I thought, okay, it's done. We're just going to wait. I hope it gets done by Monday. And then I turned on the first thing when I turned on the TV yesterday. It's the Michael Wilbon, pardon the interruption. He's on there, and they're going right to the Harbaugh story. So, okay, I'm going to listen to it. First thing, and Wilbon's a Chicago guy. He says, I just want to tell everybody, Jim Harbaugh played for the Bears at quarterback longer than he played at Michigan. So all this loyalty stuff, like, get out of here. The McCaskies love him. And then, most of the stories over the last 24 hours have been just like what a connection the Raiders have with him and everything. That. It depends. Everybody in Ann Arbor is like, no, he is ours. I mean, he lived here. He went to high school and everything else. But, out in California, the Raiders are like, he's our guy. I mean, what are you talking about? And the Bears, like, they drafted him. They think he's, he's their favorite son. So that's just an aside. Yeah,
he was all over the country, man. He played, he coached, he's been everywhere. He's got Wilbon is normally not a Michigan guy. He played at Northwestern
he doesn't like Michigan. You're right.
He didn't play there, but he went to Northwestern. So we used to beat their butt all the time. So I think he always has a problem with Michigan because we used to whoop up on him. I don't know. Jim's been all over. He's got Chicago ties. He's got Raider ties. Obviously Ann Arbor ties. So not sure how that's going to play out.
Brent, I want to take it from the football field and get to the hardwood. We are zeroing in on Saturday at 2:30. It's going to be in Ann Arbor. I'm guessing it's going to be really cold outside, and then inside is what I'm interested in what's going to happen at 2:30. Brandon, let's start with you. We've got two teams that are heading in opposite directions, at least the way it looks heading into this game. Michigan State hasn't lost since November. Michigan got slapped around a little bit on Tuesday, and they've got a lot of issues here. How do you see this game on Saturday?
Michigan State looked vulnerable against Nebraska, I suppose. That's the one bright side, I guess, is they're coming off of that, and Michigan gets them at home and with all that in mind. Aside from that, there's not a lot of hope. Michigan basketball has had a rough go at it, and funny enough, I texted Josh the other day, and I was like, "Hey, I'm no basketball expert, but this doesn't seem like it's going as well as it's supposed to." And it's going rough. But hey, there's just one of those things I think where you're coming off a hot couple of years as Juwan Howard. It's your third year as a coach. You have probably the loftiest expectations you got here because you've won 2 years in a row. You returned a guy like Dickinson and brought in a kid like Houston and like Diabate. So with all that in mind, the expectations were high, and the questions are going to come in about Juwan Howard because naturally, I don't think any of them will be legitimate things that might threaten his job by any means. But I think people are going to say, okay, well, he's not going to be this undisputed guy 3 years straight. So where do we go from here type of deal? But with Michigan State in mind, I think this is a game where they have an opportunity to eliminate all those things and kind of turn this thing around. We're still relatively early in the season, right? We still have a lot of time left. We have a ton of Big Ten play left to watch.
17 games.
All these,
yeah.
All right. So we have a ton of things can still shake out here. I mean, they can still realistically make the tournament. I mean, all that takes is a Big Ten tournament run, but even still, given how much games are left and how many games are left, and just the conference play being considered, I mean, this is I don't know if I would say it's their last opportunity, but I would say it's their first of few opportunities to turn the ship around and, see where it takes them, because right now they're in a real bad spot, losing games they shouldn't lose. I mean, they lost to historic losses now, losing to Rutgers, who they've never lost to before. So you're wondering where the season goes, and I think this game might tell us a bit. If they go out there at home and get rolled by a Michigan State team that it was thought to be better than, marginally better than before the year, then I think that raises some questions about what happens next. Are they going to finish the season with a winning record? That starts to become a real question. But if they win this game, then who knows where this momentum takes them from there and what they can turn it into. And all you have to do, we say this every year, all you have to do is get to that tournament. It don't matter. Once you're there, you're there. It's 0-0 at the beginning of every game in the tournament. So that's what's most interesting here about this Michigan State game. As far as the matchup goes, I mean, Michigan State, like you said, they're just on opposite trajectories. Michigan State has shocked everyone with how good they've been and continue to win. And Michigan has shocked everyone with how underwhelming they've been. So.
Yeah, Scar, you're looking at this game. I know you watched a little bit of Michigan State. Nebraska did give them a pretty good game last night. State's turning the ball over a lot. How are you looking at this game on Saturday?
Yeah, this game matters. It matters big time for our fan base. It matters for recruiting. Even though we're not recruiting as much in the state anymore, but this game matters for everything from that standpoint. But from when I look at Michigan State from a coaching standpoint, the two things you got to do against these guys is, number one, you got to get back on defense. Michigan State does a great job of getting easy buckets. They push every possession, every made basket. You got to get back on defense. Juwan knows that. We've done it against them, but you got to do that. You don't give them no easy buckets. The second thing you got to do is you got to rebound. That Michigan State program was built on rebounding, and they do a great job rebounding, getting second shots. You got to keep them to one shot. And it always bothers me watching Michigan State play, especially when we were playing Michigan, how these guys just get away with playing so physical under the basket with in terms of rebounding. They just have always gotten away with it. But we got to rebound. We got to get back on defense. But you're right; they are turnover prone. They're prone. They got a lot more turnovers than they've had in the past. Their transfer guard has been pretty good. He's gotten better. Bingham has really improved. He's a guy been around for 4 years. That's what you want. And you look at that kid when he was a young guy, he wasn't very productive, but he's been in the weight room. Hunter should get the better of him, but their five-star point guard is actually playing, or recruit is actually playing like a five-star kid, in my opinion. I don't know how you thought, Brandon, but that he's a good player. That Christie.
Yeah.
And listen, they're a beatable team. Our crowd has got to help us. We got to have go in there confident and take away those two things I talked about and shoot the ball like we did against Nebraska, like we're capable of shooting it, and we can be okay.
Yeah, I don't give anybody any free passes when it comes down to this, but I've already seen some of this, like, they shouldn't have given Juwan an extension and everything else. What I saw from Juwan the first year when they went down to the Bahama tournament, I could see how the team came together and when all the pieces were out there, how they can run an offense. And then, of course, the entire year last year. So, yeah, I mean, this thing's gone off the side of the road. Maybe they can get it back on. But, if he had, you can't have 3 years in a row like this. But, it's like you got to have a little bit of patience when you've seen the first 2 years. And you know what? You expect, like, Michigan State, heading into this year, they didn't know where their team was going to be and everything. But you know what? Bingham, he's playing his best basketball. You know who else is? Their other senior, Gabe Brown, who Michigan State took. Instead, they could have taken Brandon Johns, but they took Gabe Brown. You expect your guys when they're seniors to play their best ball. That's why, Devontae Jones, he's 23 years old. Like, it's not like these guys. I mean, look to the guys that, the oldest, players here, the seniors. To me, that's where it starts. And then the older players. And then you go to guys that, were freshmen last year that were contributors. They had 2 that were in the rotation, and Terrence Williams, and to a lesser degree, Zeb Jackson. But you're expecting both of those guys. And, that hasn't materialized either. That's even before you get to the load of freshmen. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. So, I'm not all that down on Juwan Howard heading into this weekend. I know a lot of other people are screaming and yelling about it, but, I thought Caleb Houston was going to be dropping threes in from everywhere. He can't hit the side of the basket. Everybody in the country would have taken him. Was that bad roster construction? People say they need to be more athletic. I thought, this guy was a top 10 player in the country. What happened?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
I hear the points about Howard, and then that this roster has been constructed poorly. It's like, no, it was constructed pretty good. It's just none of it's working.
Yeah, and I think that people like to come up with words like that without a whole lot of evidence behind it. Just, it's constructed wrong, and they don't really dwell on it too much from there. But you're right. I mean, it's the roster was talked about before the season in a much different way than it is now for obvious reasons, the record. But it's funny how before the year, everyone was talking about, he got Eli Brooks back. Eli Brooks wanting to come back and play another year. Should say something about people wanting to play for Juwan. Just Hunter Dickinson coming back as a big man to play for Juwan. Bringing in a kid like Caleb Houston, who, he's underwhelmed, but that was a monstrous recruiting victory. I mean, he was really the centerpiece of what Michigan's #1 class was. So it's been disappointing. Absolutely. We still have a ton of season left. I will probably make that point a couple of times today. There's still a ton of games left. Does it look like they're going to turn it around? No, it doesn't look like that right now, but it didn't look like this was going to keep happening. It didn't look like Caleb Houston was going to be a permanent fixture as a bad 3-point shooter. We thought it was a slump. So, and now it's turned into this. So yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of games left. Does it look great? No, it looks kind of bleak. But you made a great point with what Juwan's done in his first 2 years. And I think you can compare his first 2 years to pretty much any coach in the country's first 2 seasons and be like, oh yeah, he's pretty much just as good, if not better, or close to as good. There might be a select couple who he didn't outperform as a coach in his first 2 seasons. So, I mean, that's where I'm at with it. I mean, when Michigan hired Juwan Howard, the sentiment was, hey, give it time. Like, he's new to college. He's going to have to learn the ropes here, learn how to recruit, et cetera, et cetera. And then he just fast-tracked himself to 2 seasons that some 10, 11-year head coaches aren't accomplishing right now. And then he has a hiccup here halfway through the year, and all of a sudden it's just, the world is ending and the sky's falling. So that's victim of the moment type stuff. It's extremely common in fandom, I would say. And I think it's probably the most common now than it's ever been, though. But yeah, overall, I think Juwan's still your basketball coach for the next 10 years if you can keep him here.
Yeah, Scar, I wanted you to tell me there's one troubling aspect, all that stuff that I just said about the seniors and everything else. It's defense. And normally you say, when you go in, defense is just about, effort and intensity. You go back to that Minnesota game, Jamison Battle and Peyton Willis. Those guys went off. You go to the UCF game that they played in Orlando back on Thursday a week ago. Darian Green and Brandon Mahan, 27-26. And then in the trend repeated itself on Tuesday. Geo Baker and Ron Harper, those guys going for 27-20. I mean, these guys are lighting it up. And, they look like all-stars or all-Americans against Michigan. They're not. So, what do you make of that little trend there from teams Michigan's supposed to beat, and then you got these guys that look like all-Americans?
Danny, I coached basketball. I played a little bit, and I found, even at the younger levels, coaching defense is so hard. Your switches, your rotation, it's hard. And a lot of it is making mistakes. I don't believe that it's effort. I don't know that those guys are not trying to do the right things. I think most of it is mental mistakes defensively. I don't believe that it's effort. I think they just got to keep getting better at it. They just got to keep doing it. But I'm going to get back to some of the, talking about Juwan. I think a head coach, you got to have multiple talents. You got to be able to evaluate players, an 17-year-old talent. Now you got to be able to evaluate 21, 22-year-old talent. You got to be able to evaluate coaches, what coaches you bring in, and then you got to be able to coach, your tactics, your scheme. And, and Juwan was masterful last year. He demonstrated everything that you would want. He brought in 2 really solid transfers that were productive. He brought in freshmen that were good and productive. He showed that he could coach. He brought in good assistant coaches. He did everything right. But you know what else happens? I coached a long time. Sometimes you make a mistake, and sometimes guys don't play out and pan out like you thought. And the thing that I'm seeing is if I could have done it, if Juwan, I bet any money he would have rather signed one 4-year shooter, 6'6" perimeter shooter that is a legitimate knockdown shooter instead of taking one of the freshmen. Maybe take one less freshman and bring in one knockdown legitimate, Isaiah Livers type kid. If San Diego State had a kid when we played them, they got a kid from Cal who was a gunner. I don't know if you remember watching that game, but I just think that he's shown he can do it, and it does happen. Sometimes everything doesn't come out like you plan, and I think he's our guy. We got to stay loyal to him.
All right. Well, he is going to be there on Saturday. How do you see the game going here? If people want to know, the way we just talked about 2 teams going opposite ways. Brandon, you do sharpen the edge here. They haven't come out with the line here. I was thinking it'd be, 7.5, 8. Is that too high? How do you think the game's going to go? What do you think the line's going to be?
It'll be interesting to see where the line's at. I think that the pros are probably going to be the ones who come in and make the line what it is. Right now, how it's probably going to shake out is, I think, more in the 4.5, 5.5 point range, because on a neutral site, Michigan State's probably a 7.5, 8.5 point. And then you give 3 points towards Michigan for the home court. And I think you'll get around the 5.5 point, 4.5 point range. And then when they set that line, it'll be interesting to see where it goes from there. It'll kind of tell us about what people think are going to happen, or pros think what's going to happen. And we'll take a deeper dive into that when that happens. I'll for sure be touching on that on the board. As far as how I think the game's going to shake out, Jimmy made a good point. Michigan doesn't have a go-to scorer. They desperately need one. They need a guy. They need a guy that you can trust. When Michigan made its 2 big runs to the national championship, it had go-to guys, right? Trey Burke was the one in 2013, and probably a couple guys in the second one. Was that 2018? I forget what year it is. 2020 was a blur, and I just forget where I'm at half the time with the years. As you know, Dennis, I tend to ramble.
It's okay. You got a lot of good information.
So yeah, as far as how the game's going to shake out, Michigan defensively is just scary. I think in any game, I think it's hard to pick them to win a big game when their defense has played as poorly as it has, especially on the ball. And this is a team, Michigan State, that's going to excel with that in mind, I think, because of the offensive output they get from really in a balanced perspective. They're not just going to shoot one way or the other. And I think that they can kind of counter anything Michigan brings defensively. So yeah, hey, I think this, like I said, I think this is a game where you see what Juwan Howard is made of. If he can get these guys in the right mindset, and I'm sure he's going to put his best foot forward to do that. But it's interesting to see how he'll come out, because this is, again, we kind of talked about it when Izzo and Howard first faced off. It was a little bit not student versus teacher. That's can't say that, but it does seem like, this Izzo's a guy who's close to his way out. Howard's the guy who just came in. It's one of those things where there's a huge age gap. There's a experience gap that's greater than any Michigan State rivalry we've seen in a while. So it'll be interesting to see what Juwan does here, because he's got, I don't know if you can say that Juwan has as much to lose as Izzo does, because if Izzo goes in here with a team he's had that's better than teams he's had in a few years here against the Michigan team that's down but loses on the road to them. That'll be interesting to see. So I just think that the coaching matchup's the number one thing here. I'm excited to see what Michigan draws up, to see how they counter what Michigan State brings defensively and what Michigan State does to counter Michigan defensively. And with all that in mind, I do think the Spartans are going to win, just logically speaking. Michigan's just played poorly. But you can always make the excuse with this Michigan team in each game that it has the talent to win any game. It's similar to some of those Duke and North Carolina teams that struggled over the past 10 years. There was a couple here and there. And those that did, even though they weren't playing as good as they needed to or as they were expected to, they were still in any game as far as predictions go, just because of the pure talent that they had, could come alive at any time and take over. So it'll be exciting to see what happens in that game, just because, Michigan has nothing to lose, and it can turn this whole thing around in a game on Saturday like that.
And they will have the crowd on their side. I always talk about a puncher's chance, but it's a shooter's chance. If Michigan can go out there and start dropping some threes and make Michigan State guard them, then they can throw the ball into Hunter Dickinson, and then he's kicking it out, and guys are have wide open shots, and they can knock them down. I mean, that's, to me, sounds like the recipe to victory. There's probably about 5 or 6 more things that you would identify, like playing defense. But what else would you look at in this game, and how do you think Michigan's going to do?
No, I like Michigan in this game. I just think I like our matchup with Hunter, and I think we're going to make. We just got to hope we make shots at home. We haven't shot the ball. It seems like we've shot the ball better on the road, but I don't know how you can pick this game. They are not a typical Michigan State team. That is not a great, powerful team that we've seen from them in their great years. That's a very beatable team. Let's just play smart, and there's nobody out there that's intimidating playing for Michigan State. Let's do the little things we talked about, and I don't see any problem. We can't win this game. Something to think about. Talk about the line. It's amazing how. You don't know, half the team it might not play. Like against Rutgers with COVID, you don't know, which guys are going to be out for both teams. I mean, this stuff is running through the state of Michigan, so who knows who's going to be in the lineup Saturday.
Great point. I don't even know if there's a chance that the 4 guys. I know they specifically they said Zeb Jackson. It was personal. I mean, we assume that it was a COVID situation. Is there even a chance if these guys? Have multiple negative tests, or if they're just down for 10 days, I don't know. So if they were down for the latter, then they're not going to play. So yeah, I forgot about that for a second, but you're right. Shorthanded there, a game like this where, you need that intensity, you're going to need, you would think that it would have needed a couple of those guys like Johns, like Frankie Collins for sure, helped them here. But that's a good point when it comes down to the line. Vegas has got it tough. You guys, Brandon, you guys that are always looking at the numbers and everything, pretty tough. Don't bet today. Wait till Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, right?
Yeah, no, definitely wait on every sport right now. I would not make any wagers on any ahead of time type of situation, unless maybe the national championship, because if the playoffs survived without anybody really being lost, I think that the championship will too. Maybe that's the one, but other than that, just stay away. Even that game, I would stay away until the day before, the day of. This stuff is crazy. I've actually got 5 family members right now all positive. Both my parents, both my grandparents, and my brother and my sister. Well, my sister's not my brother, but it's crazy. So I would stay from anything that's beyond even. Honestly, I would stay away from anything even beyond 16 hours away. Like I would wait until I would say 8 a.m. to make your 8 p.m.s. That's honestly and I'm waiting even later to make my picks. Like my daily picks are coming in at 4 o'clock. Usually I put them up in the morning, but with all this in mind, I'm just waiting to see, because we had that situation where on Saturday, I believe, or Sunday, I had Memphis in my dailies and I had them 10.5. Well, that line closed at Memphis 2.5 or 3.5 because Amani Bates and Jalen Duran and another kid were out. And those two are the two very important pieces to the Memphis puzzle. Memphis ends up losing. So I just looked at that and I was like, I'm just going to start waiting until 5 o'clock because I wrote that at 10 a.m. and at 12, they were all out. So yeah, I would wait until honestly 6-7 hours before your game.
Brandon, this talk reminded me of Coach Schembeckler back in the day. He always used to tell us, watch who you're hanging around with, especially if they're asking questions about injuries and especially if they're older guys. Know who you're hanging around with, guys, because he didn't trust anybody. And it's so true, because there were guys that used to just kind of infiltrate and try to get information about injury. If you had early information about which guys were out because of COVID, it could be a huge advantage for a bettor.
Are you kidding me?
Oh,
yeah, you're right. That means,
absolutely.
That's the thing when they whether whoever it is, Fox, ESPN, anything else, when they get the information, some of these guys that they're working for the gambling, they're broadcasting for it, they're sponsors for it. You before you announce who's going to be out, and everybody, and that's going to adjust the line. I mean, there's plays to be made. We hope your family, everybody in there that you mentioned, is going to be okay, and they have no symptoms at all, and it just goes through. We're going to talk recruiting a little bit later, Brandon, you and I, on who got next. But I did have something I wanted to play for you. It comes from Clint Cosgrove, who came on the show yesterday. And for this little Michigan recruiting spotlight, I asked him about Josh Connerly Jr., the tackle from Seattle, Washington, and U of M's chances. Hear what he had to say.
When you have Michigan, who's coming off a fantastic season, there isn't a coaching change. And you look at the way the offensive line played this year, and the way they were running the ball. I mean, as an offensive lineman, who wouldn't want to play in that type of offense? And I think he'd be a great fit. I do not think it's a lock that Connerly goes there, but I do think Michigan has a very good chance at him, and he's got a chance to be a very good football player, a kid who could potentially contribute early if needed. But I think he's a guy that Michigan fans have every right to be excited about. And I do think he is a guy that is in play for Michigan.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Connerly is an excellent prospect. And I think when Michigan got Andrew Gentry, the 2020 lineman who's coming in next year as what would be the age of a junior, I think that made people think maybe they weren't going to take another tackle. But Josh Connerly is certainly near the top or at the top of their list here for the second signing day, the last signing day. And as far as the prospect goes, I mean, Clint makes a great point about potentially making an early impact because he is that dude. I mean, he is that good. He has draft potential, like serious draft potential. He's got the frame. He's got the body. He's got the mechanics. Everything is there for him as a player. He's a high IQ player as well. The wrinkle in the Connerly recruitment is in that Courtney Morgan was his closest relationship here at Michigan, and that was a big player. I mean, Michigan was thought to be a lock after his visit in September for the Washington game, ironically enough, and he is a Washington native. For those at home who might not know, he is a Washington native. So when Courtney Morgan, his best relationship, left for Washington, not only his home state, but initially where he was thought to go before Michigan got as involved as it did this fall. And then Washington got rid of its coach and had a terrible season. That's a whole other story. So with Morgan there now, that really puts a wrinkle in things because I think that makes Washington a serious player. Not only that, but Lincoln Riley at USC, he started to go after Connerly, and I don't think that they could make a late push at this stage. Michigan still seems ahead of them. And then Miami has also gotten really involved here with Mario Cristobal there now. So with him there, a former lineman in and of himself, and then a guy who was in Oregon, recruited Connerly at Oregon when he was in Washington. There's some familiarity there as well. So you have four real players here. And I think Michigan is the highest I think Michigan has been the closest of the group to get him to commit because I thought that was going to happen following the Washington game, and it didn't. And then he nearly visited again for the Ohio State game, but elected to go see Washington again instead. So it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out because of kind of how much it's changed and evolved with the coaching carousel. If Morgan doesn't go to Washington, Michigan might have gotten him rather easily. But if Lincoln Riley doesn't go to USC might not get involved. And if Cristobal doesn't go to Miami, then Miami doesn't get involved. So now you have these two teams getting involved, and you still have Michigan's initial battle with Washington. So honestly, on signing day, the first signing day, Josh and I had spoken, and we had really kind of talked about every kid. And Connerly was a guy we were like, okay, like with Morgan at Washington and with his home state being Washington, we do think that ultimately, if we had to put a pin on the donkey, we would probably think that, he's going to end up at Washington. But doesn't seem that way so much anymore. It seems more like Michigan's held its ground and that they have a lead going into February. Well, going into the middle of January here. But yeah, I mean, excellent player, excellent recruit, top 50 kid, probably one of the 5 best tackles in the country.
Scar, you could have gone anywhere back in the day here, and and it didn't matter who was on the defensive line. You're like, I don't care. You can have all Americans. I'm coming in. So I don't know. You reading the tea leaves at all on Connerly?
It's interesting. The kid's he's got schools all over the country. Florida, USC, Washington. So he's not afraid to go and travel. And obviously, you have to have a feeling of trust wherever you're going to be recruited. That's such a huge thing, and it's even more important if you're going to go 3,000 miles away. So I totally understand that that feeling of trust and how important that is. And but I see something that I've seen and read this, how important the recruiting coordinator is in recruiting now. When I played, there was a guy that was there for 20 years, Fritz Seifert. He was outstanding. He was a recruiting coordinator, and his job was kind of to set the table, coordinate the visits. And you talked to him a lot. You did everybody talked to the recruiting coordinator a lot. You want to come to a basketball game, you want to do this, whatever. You spend a lot of time talking to that guy. But you spend a lot of time with the guy recruiting you, the position coach recruited you, and then the coach that you were going to play for. And of course, the head coach and how, who is the head coach, how important that is. I'm just amazed, Brendan, how important I hear recruits talk about the recruiting coordinator. Because for me to put it into perspective, it'd be like if you guys were going to apply at some, Fortune 500 company, and you had offers from different companies, that you're making your decision based on how well you got along with the secretary in somebody's office. I mean, I don't want to downplay it that much, but that guy, I'm not playing for that guy. He's not coaching me. He's just he's a guy that recruits, and I know it's important. It's just interesting to me when I see that. And but Michigan has to continue to put out great offensive linemen, and Jim has done it for a while. We got Michael Onwenu playing with the Patriots, and he's got a lot of guys that when he was with Stanford, the pros knew they were going to get a physical run blocking guy, and a lot of these teams are this spread stuff, and they're not double teaming, and they're not doing the things that a lot of the pro teams want. So we've got to continue to put out, great players at the offensive line position. That will help recruiting. But anyway, those are some of my thoughts about him. Hopefully he comes, but it's a long way to go, and we'll see how it plays out.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think that just speaking on the recruiting coordinator part, it's one of those things where the recruiting coordinator is the only guy on, involved with the communication of the prospect whose full-time job is to strictly recruit. I mean, you made a good point saying that they don't coach or anything, which is true. But that prime, vessel of communication when you're in high school, and also the evolution of the recruiting coordinator position, because now it's not virtual. Now it's like all virtual, right? It used to be more of an in-person thing, a phone call here and there type of deal. But now it's completely virtual to where you're getting, calls or messages or whatever it was. And you're primarily hearing from that recruiting coordinator because that's their full-time job, is to keep up and then send, give those reports to the coaches and all of that. So that's one part of it. But I think you make a good point in saying that's not who you're going to play for. That's not who you're going to, quote unquote, go to war with every day and all of that. So I understand that. I think really the anomaly here with this situation is more Courtney Morgan than it is his position. Courtney Morgan had a lot of great relationships with a lot of recruits and primarily West Coast kids, but all the same, Courtney Morgan was an excellent relationship builder here, and he's going to be at Washington too. And I think that he built a special one with Connerly. And I think you make a good point in what you said. I just think in Connerly's situation, it's more about the individual at that position than it really is the position itself.
Yeah,
Good stuff.
I get it. Every kid is different, Brendan. You go on a recruiting
Right.
trip. Every coach pushes different buttons. Every kid is looking for something different. What worked with that kid might not work with you, might not work with me. And you're right. That guy, obviously, again, to go that far, to go to Ann Arbor from Washington, that was your guy, man. I totally understand the point you're making.
Brandon, we'll see you at 3:00. Thanks for your work.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Brendan, good talking to you, buddy. Go Blue.
And Scar, the memorabilia minute, I'm going to show you a couple former Michigan players. I'm going to see if you can guess who they are. You know what you said about the recruiting coordinator, it rang true for me. I was thinking back when I started, Bob Kamel was the recruiting coordinator for Michigan. I think he was at Notre Dame. Then he came in and, Bob Kamel, I had great conversations with him. Boy, he could really tell a lot of stories. So I could see why he would be good as a recruiting coordinator. But none of the guys ever were like, yeah, well, Bob, I'm coming because Bob Kamel or whatever. And then Mike DeBoard later. And I think he was the recruiting coordinator after Kamel. And it was kind of the same thing. Like, he could talk about all the guys. Of course, he knew them all. And but it didn't seem like it figured in like it does now. So I hear what you're saying about that.
Listen, the recruiting coordinator, it matters. You go on a recruiting visit, you meet a bunch of people, man. You meet the secretary, you meet the trainers, you meet you meet everybody. So all of it matters. But it all starts from the head coach down. Those guys are going to be more influential. So I don't want to say that the guy doesn't matter. But it just, it has its place.
Did you see who got game with Ray Allen as Jesus Shuttlesworth, Scar? Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I remember that.
I liked his recruiting trip. I always thought that was pretty nice recruiting trip. All right, this is kind of a curveball for you. I don't know if you can see. Do you know who this Michigan player is?
Is that? Oh man, it's so hard to see. Is that a defensive lineman?
It's a tough one. It's a wide receiver. It's a tough one because I don't even know if you can see his name if I put it up there. It's Mario Manningham, who if he was wearing, his number there, I didn't even know he played for San Francisco. You think about him playing for the Giants, and then he had that fantastic catch in the Super Bowl. I'm going to give you one more here. This is a linebacker that played for the Jets.
Oh God, I can't think of his name. I remember watching him. Is that
pretty good linebacker?
That's David Harris?
It is. Look at that, Scar. I just threw you the curveball to come in there, and you rang the bell. Very impressive.
Well, let me tell you, Denny, I actually coached against him. I coached in the state of Michigan high school all-star football game back in the day. And I was on the East squad. We had Drew Stanton as our quarterback. We ended up winning that game. But Harris was on the other team playing for the West. They divided the state East and West. And I coached against him. And he was a good player back in high school. And he had a good career, man.
Well, while we're telling stories here, let's have another one for you when you were a high school coach. I can remember being at it was a Michigan party after a game, and this guy came up and he said, I'm going to tell you a story about a freshman in high school. This is the greatest player I've ever seen. He's hitting guys. He's throwing them into the sideline. They got to take him out because he's injured. They can't even hit at practice because he's injuring everybody. He's going to be the greatest football player of all time. Well, it was Lamar Woodley when he played at Saginaw. I mean, he's just an outstanding football player. Scar, in high school, was there a guy that you saw at a young age and you just knew automatically, oh man, this guy for sure. This guy's a sure thing, at least as an excellent prospect and a sure thing in college. Anybody like that?
I coached a couple kids. Was part of a staff that you remember Rocky Freitas?
I don't know that name.
Anyway, he played with the Lions. He was an offensive tackle a long time ago, but his son, I was on a staff at Clintondale. His son, Mackay, big 6'7" tight end defensive tackle. I mean, you could just, you knew right away this kid was something special. But
where'd he go?
He ended up going to Arizona. They recruited him as a tight end, and as soon as he signed, he had a number 70 jersey on. Well, all that number 80 stuff went out the window when he got he had a good career, but he was a big, strong. You knew he was going to be something special.
Surprised the Michigan coaches weren't calling you to get in good with him.
Yeah, they didn't pursue him. I tried. I told them about him. There's a couple of kids that I had that one guy went on to have a great career at Central that could have played at Michigan, I thought. But whatever. Everybody has their different things they're looking for.
Right. All right, Scar. Saturday, I don't know what you're doing. The Michigan State game. I'll be on afterwards. Be great to have you there.
I'll be ready. Yeah, I'll be ready to go. Denny, I just wanted to comment because we've done a pretty good job commenting to our listeners. And one of the listeners talked about that we should go ahead and recruit Caleb Williams, and you got to remember though, man, there's so much about loyalty, and I don't want Michigan to be the transfer school. I just don't want to have that reputation, because if we get into that reputation of being a transfer school, it's going to make it harder to recruit kids. I mean, it's just like, it's kind of like a relationship with a woman, man. It's the same kind of thing. You want to have some type of commitment. Now, listen, we've done a little bit of it, but I just wanted to comment to our listener because he thought we should go ahead and sign Williams. And everybody has their thoughts on it. I just think we have two good ones and we need to stay loyal to them. I don't want to be the transfer school.
Well, you know what? I'll say that, to give a 2 cents in on that as well. I get what you're saying in the quarterback position. I mean, Michigan's already, they've got two guys. What would be fantastic? Both of these guys have 3 years left. It's not like, Cade, is just going to have a final year and you say, hey, JJ, we'll do a little split. And that, these guys could still, have 3 more years because of COVID with, you get that bonus year for McNamara. So eventually, you would think like these guys aren't both going to be splitting reps for 3 years, but next year, it wouldn't be fantastic for Michigan if these guys battled it out and then whoever won, and then they would still play and have some sort of mix. I don't know if that's reality or not, but put the quarterback position, putting somebody else in, even if you think they're more talented, into that mix. And then, you got to think about the guys that you're recruiting. Like Michigan's talking to Dante Moore right now, who, they want in next year's class. I mean, they have zeroed in on that. You start having some revolving door, and the guys that were here, next thing you know, they're hitting the transfer portal. You know what? Who knows? Williams, he might be ready to bolt, as well. If, he doesn't like things there. That's a very delicate thing, especially with the quarterback thing. I'd take that call and say, hey, it's great that you're calling us and everything else, but, we're all set at this position. We got McCarthy, we got McNamara, and, we're going to be bringing in Dante Moore. So, you know what? Good luck to you, but we just don't have the room. Even if he said that, he was your number one choice to go, all those factors, I'm with you. I wouldn't take him.
But yeah, let's hope for luck Saturday, man. 2:30. We'll be tuned in. I'll be ready to roll after, Denny.
All right, Scar. See you later.
Go Blue.
There he is, Jim Scarcelli. Thanks to Brandon Justice.